everyone. We're ready to get started with our Kentucky Junior Heifer Show. Entering the ring right now, we have Class 1 Angus. Class 1 Angus. We need those Class 3 and Class 4 Angus to the makeup ring.
That's fine. Well, good evening. Welcome to your Kentucky-owned Junior Heifer Show here. Starting off here in our Angus with a really high-quality pair. And I think two heifers that have some give and take between them, no doubt. Young man's highly presented heifer here that's going to go ahead and win the class is one that just grabs your attention when she walks in the ring out here. And I think the difference for me as you study the two is just simply length. I think you study this one through the front one-third of her skeleton, her length of spine, her length and squareness that she has to her hip. And I think that that's a pretty logical place to start. A heifer that gets out and goes fairly well there off of her rear two, got some added foot and bone to her. You know, if we're going to change her, I'll be the first one to admit we need to lay this one back in terms of the angle to her shoulder, relax her in her knee, and drag her down there in the center of her spine. But a heifer that's got some extras about her. Again, I like the length, I like the pin width and the squareness. Young lady's got a moderate frame kind of a heifer here next, one that maybe has just a shot more center body to her, a female that, like our class winner, gets out and goes good enough there off of her rear two, one that's not quite as square and big in terms of her pin set, and as I've already said, one we just need to stretch out from end to end. But a nice pair of heifers is a good way to start off our show.
Results from Class 1 in our Angus show. First place went to Colby Cooper from Mayslick, and second place went to Jewel Toll from Lawrenceburg. Congratulations to them. Now entering the ring, we have Class 2 Angus heifers. Class 3 should be on deck.
Another high quality pair here, and I think a pretty easy place to start off in my mind. Young man brings us really a complete kind of a heifer here that's got a lot of ring presence to her. First thing you notice about this one is when he tugs on that wire and picks her head up out of the top side of her shoulder. Here's one that's got a lot of feminine character up front, one that's able to pick that head and neck up really tall out of the top side of her skeleton. A female from there back that's got the appropriate amount of length. She still balances up really good underneath. Got that right kind of sweep and curvature underneath. Still good in her heart, has plenty of depth of flank. We set her in motion, and I think in comparison to a heifer here in second, one that gets out and travels relatively well. If we're going to change our class winner just ever so slightly, I think she's won it from a three-dimensional standpoint. You might want to just back on that class winner. From a three-dimensional standpoint, we'd like to just bust her apart just a little bit in terms of her lower quarter, give her just a shot more twist. But I think one in terms of her quality and her look is pretty hard to turn in this particular group. A nice heifer in second, one that's maybe just a rib shorter, one that's a little boxier in her design, female that's blessed with a lot of rib shape, a lot of topside power. She maybe even edges our class winner just ever so slightly in terms of quarter and just terms of raw shape. For me, I'd like to stretch this one out through the front third of her skeleton, jack her up just a little bit in terms of her front end, but a nice heifer nonetheless.
Results from Class 2. First place went to J.W. Cox and second to Clayton Bell. Now entering the ring, we have Class 3. Class 4 should be on deck. Since we've got a little bit of a bigger class, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our judge for the day. John Sweeney, his wife Kayla, and son Jack reside in Cedarville, Ohio. They operate Sweeney cattle, which focus on raising Angus show cattle. These cattle are marketed in conjunction with Kayla's family operation in Campbell Co., where John, Kayla, and Jack also help. Originally from Mitchellville, Iowa, John is a 2011 graduate of Iowa State University with a degree in ag business. After graduating, he started a career with Co. Animal Health as the beef sales representative for Indiana and Ohio, where he currently works. John has judged many national, state, and local shows in 10 states. If you all would join me in welcoming our judge for the night, Mr. John Sweeney.
Our first big class here as we progress through the Angus Heifer Show, and I think really a nice pair of heifers we have to pick from here on the top end. Young lady that's going to go ahead and wins a heifer that I think just kind of commands your attention when she hits the ring. One that's big outline, one that's ultra long necked and eye headed, and a female from there that's got some extras. I like this one from the profile, long spine female, one that's got a ton of foot and bone underneath her. We ask her to go out here in the ring, and I think that she does so in a good enough fashion. You compare her to the rest of this class. You know, if we're going to change that class winner just ever so slightly, I might like to see just a little more real rib shape underneath her. A heifer that's just a shot tighter and just a shot shallower there in her chest floor back to her navel. But one that's got so many intriguing pieces, one that really cuts a nice silhouette out here in the ring. A lot of the same things can be said for this heifer here in second. A female to me that's a shot more moderate in terms of her kind, but one that's still got a nice look up front, tremendously long spined female that I think has a bit of an advantage in terms of her genuine rib shape and the way her underline sweeps underneath her. You know, for me out here today, she's just a little bit plainer in terms of her shape. You get in behind her, maybe not as expressive. A female to me that's maybe, you know, she's sure sound enough in the way she goes off of her rear two, but a little less attractive, a little extra sharp there in her hock. Maybe wants to throw those rear two up underneath her when we set her in motion. I think another close decision here between 3 and 4, two heifers that have some similarities to them. Young man's heifer here that's going to go ahead and get the nod, I think just offers us a little bit more substance. You get right up on top of the cattle. This female here has just a little bit more shape to her, and when the young man gets her top down and gets her pulled together, I think she's just a little bit more collected in terms of her outline. Young lady's got a fresher conditioned heifer here, and that might be her advantage over the one that goes right before. What you see is what you get in terms of presentation, and that's okay. For me, when you compare her to the ones on the top side of this class, she wants to fall off there right in behind her blades and pick up in the center of her spine. Like her to maintain her levelness out through her hip just a little bit more nicely to be upgraded here in this competitive class. You know, and we round out the class with another challenging pair, and ones that I think have some differences. The young lady here is doing a great job of hanging with a heifer that doesn't really want to act the best. The one that's most genuine in terms of her condition out here, I like her freshness. This is a sharp-featured heifer that's cool-headed and tight-throated. For me, I think it's quite obvious. She just needs a little bit more power and performance, weight per day of age. We round out the class with a heifer that actually has that. I think she does have a little bit more muscle, a little more body, a little more shape there to her underline. I like to redesign her in the way she sets down there off her rear too. But a good big class there, a nice pair on the top side.
Results from Class 3. First place went to Michaela Massey from London. Second to Callie Dorosset from Sulphur. Third went to Austin Pito. Fourth to Bailey Kelly. Fifth to Nora Nunn. And sixth to Clarabelle Bishop. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now entering the ring, we have Class 4 of our Angus heifers.
Well, I apologize for taking a little bit extra time there. I usually pride myself on being pretty swift and making decisions, but I'm not sure if I've judged a class this tough in quite a while. Angus heifers all the way down this group that are very, very good. I think this top trio is excellent. That said, the young lady's heifer that's going to go ahead and wins the class, I think is one that just kind of obviously grabs your attention when she hits the ring. This thing from an outline standpoint is pretty impressive. One that's so powerful, so stout built, so good in terms of her body and her rib. I love the sweep this one has to her underline. Massive in terms of her muscle system, one that's enormous boned and footed, and a female with all the power that she lays on. She still gives you a good enough look as you study her through her front 1/3. A heifer that's 12 o'clock in terms of condition. I don't think she needs to be any leaner or any fatter either way, but still one that reads with some feminine character up there through her front 1/3. One that's got some pretty neat pieces to beat on. To breed on. We would shrink her head just a notch if we could. She's a little bit bigger in terms of her skull. A female just every once in a while out here that just wants to hesitate on her rear pasterns just ever so slightly, but that's getting super critical on a very good heifer. A young man's heifer here in second is one that's kind of the total opposite in terms of type and kind. One that's a little more moderate in terms of her frame. She matches her in terms of her underline, her body, her rib shape. A female that I actually think has an advantage in terms of the way she gets out and goes at her hock and her rear pastern. This one's back leg is absolutely beautiful when we set this heifer in motion. For me, as you compare her back probably to the cattle on either side of her, we just like to stretch her out, make her a little bit longer necked, make her just a little bit bigger in terms of her outline. Every once in a while out here, this one ties so high out of her front end. When the young man doesn't have her just set just perfectly, that heifer wants to rock forward in her knee just ever so slightly. But a heifer that's very complete, very loose-made, big-bodied, and easy keeping. A lot of the same things could be said about our heifer in third. And, man, there's things I love about this female. She may have the most gorgeous underline of any in the class. I love that sweep and that feminine curve she has down there. A female that when you stand in beside her, you wonder just how much power she'll have. You step in behind this one, and she's blessed with so much shape. Big hip female, big back female that's got a lot of expression and three-dimensional quality. For me, like the one before, we'd stretch her out just ever so slightly through her front 1/3. At the same time, I'd like to lay that chest floor just a little more neatly back into her body wall. And it's when we set this one in motion, this one's just a little bit smaller in terms of her foot shape and foot size. But a heifer, again, that's tremendously high quality. He's got a bright future for the young lady. A heifer here coming around next. This one, the longer she is out here, I kind of moved her up a couple spots. One that's tremendously loose-made, big-bodied, one that's soft-spined, really gets out and goes with a lot of athleticism. A female, as you compare her back to those high-quality heifers on the top end, maybe not as sharp-featured, a little deeper from the top of her crest to her throat. We'd clean her up just a touch up front, maybe throw a little bit more bone underneath this one, but a good female in her own right. Got a bright future for the young lady. One that is a little more tricked out comes next. I think one that's a little tighter at her throat, a little neater headed, one that's tremendously long spined, maybe even offers us just a touch more bone than the one that goes before. For me, it's when you step in behind the cattle. This one's pretty flat in terms of her forerib shape. We just like to give her a little more expression and shape as you study her out through her rear quarter, but a good profile and kind of a heifer nonetheless. Heifer here next is giving the young lady a handful out here, and she's doing a great job of managing through it. Another one that's moderate in terms of her kind, big-bodied type of a female. We'd like to lean this one up just a touch, drag her down in terms of the center of her top, but a very useful, high-quality kind of a heifer nonetheless. The sheared female comes next. Young lady, hats off to you for having that done. I feel a little bit behind the eight ball. I need to get home and get to clipping. But having this one naked out here doesn't affect her quality in the least. One that's big bone, big footed, mobile in the way she travels off of her rear too. I'd like to give her a little more depth of flank, just balance her up underneath the shot better, but a quality heifer nonetheless. Round out the class, young man, you got in as tough a class as I've seen in a long time. My hat's off to you for battling out here. You've got an easy keeping female, one that's got some length and strength to her spine. We'd like to give her a touch more bone and maybe just see her sweep her underline a little nicer underneath her, but a good way to round out a tremendously competitive class.
There's one more class. Results from Class 4. First place went to Josie Phillips from Maysville. Second to Josie Phillips from Maysville. Third went to Josie Hopper. Fourth to Kat Branscombe. Fifth to Brianna Smith. Sixth, Callie DeRosset. Seventh to Emily Caffey. And eighth went to Mason Way. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 5. This is our last class of our Angus breed, and then we'll be competing for our champion and reserve Angus heifer.
Another challenging class here as we progress through the Angus show. And honestly, I think all four of these heifers have some things that we like an awful lot about them, and then certainly some things that we would want to change. A young lady's heifer here that's going to go ahead and win the class. I think she puts together the most good pieces. This is one that has the ability to pick her head and neck up out of the top side of her shoulder. She's a smooth-shouldered female that's good in her forerib and balanced from there back. And you read her in the angles to her structure, and while you might want to lay her back in her knee and her shoulder angle just ever so slightly, she's athletic in the way she goes off of her rear too. A female that's got enough muscle and power for me. You know, you compare her to the heifer that goes right behind her, maybe not quite as deep there right in her center. And young man's got a little more moderate framed here, or a little bit more moderate framed heifer here that goes in second, and one that's ultra loose made and big boned. And we like those things about her. For me, you know, we've been talking length a lot today, and I'd like to just pick this one up out of the front 1/3 of her skeleton, stretch her neck out, make her a touch taller fronted, and we'd like to just strengthen her just a touch there in her loin as she goes. But one that's moderate, easy keeping, a lot of good things to say about that female. Two really big, powerful type females here to round out our class. Young man's got him one here that's just so bold in terms of her rib shape. Big old hip and a lot of muscle in this female as you get in behind her. You know, as I compare to the two that go before her, it's the angles to her rear too that concern me just a little bit. A little straighter there in the angle to her hock, and then particularly you watch the way she sets her pasterns down. Just a little more laborsome in the way she goes there off of her rear too. The female here that rounds out the class, I think you could say some similar things in terms of power and density and length. We like those things about her. Of course, for me, you study this female there at the front end of her structure. She's the straightest shouldered, straightest kneed heifer in this particular class, one that we'd like to redesign in the way she's hooked up there in her rear too as well. But again, a female that's got a load of power and a load of performance.
Results from Class 5. First place went to Michaela Massey from London. Second to Clayton Bell from Irvington. Third to Levi Womack. And fourth to Mackenzie and Conway. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now we are selecting for our champion and reserve champion, Angus Heifer. At the conclusion of our Angus drive, we will start off with our black Herefords. F1 black Herefords.
Well, we're off to a fast start here in our heifer show. You know, from end to end out here, some tremendous heifers here in our Angus show, and I knew that the quality would be good when you come to Kentucky Beef Expo, but quite honestly, it's probably been a decade since I've been to this show, and I guess I'm thrilled with what we see out here. I think from end to end, these cattle are high caliber. They can go on and compete at a lot of different levels and do a lot of things when you get them in production. I won't belabor the point. I think there's one out here that's pretty edgy for me in terms of what she can do in production, in terms of a donor cow, in terms of her big pieces. We'll pull in a reserve for contention as well, and I'll give them another look. But, folks, let's congratulate these Angus exhibitors. This is pretty high water out here.
Congratulations to our grand champion Angus heifer, Josie Phillips, and our reserve also went to Josie Phillips, both out of the same class. Congratulations to her. Now we will have our black Hereford division, class number 6.
Divisions or classes? What did he say? We progress here into our Black Hereford show, and certainly I have to acknowledge a first for me. I've never evaluated this breed before, and young man brings us a good representative, just good cattle in general. In terms of having some look and eye appeal and femininity, gorgeous headed female that's tight jawed, tight throated, got a lot of freshness up front. From there back, I think one that's got enough in terms of body and muscle for me. Female that drives off an athletic back leg. We might drop her just a touch in terms of her flank, just maybe just stouten her up and intensify her just a shot in terms of her bone work and feet, but a good heifer and a good way to start off this part of our show.
Congratulations to your champion F1 Black Hereford, Austin Herm. Now coming in the ring, we have class 7, our first class of percent Black Herefords.
Another nice pair out here in our Black Hereford show. I think certainly some give and take between. Young man brings us a goggle-eyed heifer here that's going to go ahead and win, and I like this one just a little bit better in terms of her length and in terms of just the amount of foot and bone she has underneath her. This female's got an attractive back leg, sits down good and secure there on a big stout hoof, as we already said. Female that I think is good enough as you study her through her front 1/3. Certainly one you'd want to deepen just a shot there in the center of her rib, balance her out a touch better through her flank. And when you step in behind her, I think she's got enough muscle, but for me, I think you could power her up just a touch in terms of her rear quarter and back shape. But one that's got some cool pieces as you look at her from the side. A stouter featured female in terms of muscle comes second. This one is bigger back. She's thicker ended, just a touch square hipped, if you will. I think this one maybe has just a touch more condition on her from a comparative standpoint, but one that's still fresh in terms of her kind. I'd like to stouten this one up just a touch in terms of her bone work, in terms of her feet. Like to see her go with just a little bit more authority and a little bit more of an attractive gait there off of her rear too, but a high quality pair of heifers nonetheless. A big bodied single entry here that sets down on a big, huge foot. I certainly like that about her. She's one for me that you could drop just a touch in her center and back into her flank. Power her up just a touch as you step in behind her, but a female that does have enough shape as you study her right out of the backside of her blades and out over her loin edge. I think with a little bit more time and maturity, that's an area she can improve. Young lady brings us a high quality single entry.
Getting caught up from our black Herefords. Class 7 results. First place went to Austin Hearn. Second to Easton Hunt. Class 8, Macy Thompson was first place. And in the ring currently we have Class 9.
Another single entry, but one that could certainly stand some competition. I like this heifer a lot. One that's got a feminine look through her front third. Female that opens up with some rib shape and some depth and some symmetry from there back. One that's certainly acceptable in terms of her muscularity. A female that I think gets out and goes pretty good there off of her rear too. We might like to relax her just a touch in the angle to her shoulder and her front knee and toe ahead just a little more squarely. But some of that could be attitude as well. Young lady's doing a great job of battling with a heifer that doesn't want to act the best out here today. Look forward to getting this one out here in our final drive in some deeper water. Another single entry here and another great addition to our final drive. I think these black Herefords are shaping up to be a quality group out here. Young lady brings us one that's just chock full of power, and you get up on top of this female, you have to appreciate the shape that she comes out of the backside of her blades and then just opens up into an enormous rib cage, one that's got that arch and pop there to the top side of her rib cage that we like to see, one that balances up good underneath, a female that's got some added foot underneath of her, and one that's probably carrying just a touch more condition at this juncture, but she does it well. I think one that's still got some length through her front third, still got some class and eye appeal, a very high quality heifer in her own right.
Results from Class 9A. First place went to Emily Tabor. Now we're going to show for our champion and reserve Black Hereford percent.
I'm very pleased with the drive that we put together out here in our Black Hereford show. Certainly some differences in terms of type and kind. We kind of had them chopped up in singles there, so it's nice to get them out here and be able to compare them amongst one another. I think there's differences in cattle, as I already said, and I think there's a couple of them that kind of rise to the top, in my opinion. I think our champion is one that's impressive just from a shape and a muscularity and a power standpoint. We're going to use a reserve that's really good looking and got some neat lines and a bright future in front of her. With that, I'll put the mic down and show you how I like them. Folks, let's congratulate these exhibitors on a nice drive of cattle.
Congratulations to our champion Black Hereford, which went to Emily Tabor. Now entering the ring, we have Class 10. This is the only class of keys that we have. So this is also our drive for the key division.
Well, just 3 females out here in our Chi-Angus show. So first and second here will be your subsequent champions. Young lady stock and legged heifer here I think is a pretty easy place to start off in my mind. A highly presented, expertly showed female that cuts a nice silhouette out here in the ring. This female's powerful, extra so. You get up on top of her, she's massive in terms of her back and her rear quarter. Enormous boned and footed female that's got a lot of utility when you set her in a production setting. For me, with that power, she comes a tick coarser in her shoulder, maybe just a pinch around her in the shape to her hip, but I think her overall quality is what propels her to the top spot. Certainly some give and take here between your reserve and third. I went ahead and used a female that I felt like just gave us a little neater look. The young man's got an extremely fresh conditioned heifer here that ties ultra high out of the top side of her shoulder. Beautiful in terms of her body wall and her rib shape from there back. She's got the correct shape and angles there to her hock and her rear pastern. I'd like to balance her up a touch better as you study her down her top. She wants to break just a shot right there in the middle of her back, roll up there in her jump and drop off in her pins. But a female that I think, just gives us a little bit more of a ladylike appearance and probably does so the best of any in this particular class. We round out the class with a high-performing, muscular kind of a heifer, one that's tremendously long-bodied. She probably matches our class winner more closely in terms of type and kind. She's got the same set of feet and legs underneath her, that intensity of foot and bone, if you will. For me, you study underneath a nice fit job, one that's probably not quite as genuine in the shape to her rib or the depth to her rib. This one's ultra elevated in her chest floor, and I like that. But a female that probably doesn't drop and sweep just quite as nicely when you get in behind that. A female that wants to break in her loin and pick up in her tailhead. But, folks, with that, that was a division. Let's give a nice round of applause to our champion reserve, Chi-Angus.
Results from Class 10. First place and your champion key went to Claire Beth Peterson from Nancy. Second place and your reserve key went to Tanner Wienel from Butler. And third went to Haley Cooper from Verona. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 11. This is our only Chi-Angus heifer. So this is also your champion Chi-Angus.
A single entry breed out here in the Chi-Angus show, and I honestly feel kind of bad for the young lady. This one needs some competition. I think she could easily stand it. A high quality heifer, one that blends together a lot of good pieces in terms of femininity and an elegant look up front. And this one gets big from their back. Bold rib, thick-ended, big-hipped, a female that's comfortable in terms of her structure. I like that one quite well. We could stretch her out just a touch, maybe make her just a hair longer spine, but that's being ultra critical on a very good champion, Chi-Angus. Let's give her a nice round of applause.
Our champion Chi-Angus heifer went to Kat Branscombe from Nancy, Kentucky. Now in the ring we have Class 12. This is our class of commercials, and this is also showing for the division.
Only 3 commercial females out here. So again, for those of you following along, our champion in reserve will be the ones here right in front of me. And as you'd expect in the commercial division, I think you have a lot of different breed types working, and so you get some differences in terms of type and kind and some diversity. The one that I'm drawn to, the young lady solid black heifer here that's not wanting to cooperate the best, I think puts together the most good female pieces out here. One that's really beautiful in terms of her head shape, one that, maybe isn't the most exquisite in terms of her neck shape from the top of her crest to her throat, but one that's still skinny and lean and feminine in that regard, smooth-shouldered, great big-bodied, and I think that's her decided advantage in this particular class. She's high-chested, and from there back drops and sweeps a really nice underline, a female that's sound enough in her structure. And sure, she's not as big a bone, not as big a muscled as the two females right in behind her, but she has more than enough for a female in my mind. I think she wins this division rather handily. I think the discussion's a little bit here between reserve and third. Young lady's got a little bit more moderate kind of a heifer here coming next, one that's a little shorter faced, a little shorter cannon, with that a little smaller in terms of her frame score. You look past that though, and I think this is one that's just simply more comfortable in terms of her structure, more appropriate in the angle to her shoulder and her knee, a female that gets out and is more comfortable in the way she travels off of her rear too. Of course, one that's a bit more advanced in terms of her maturity, depositing just a little bit of condition there in her chest, and we'd balance that up in relation to her center body, knock that tail head down in her, but some of the similar things can be said for our heifer coming next. If you like them powerful, if you like them fat-legged and big-footed and burly in terms of their build, you might like some things about this one because she does it in spades. Massive bone, massive footed, a female that's got a lot of shape and a lot of power. With it comes a little more skull, a little more shoulder, a little rounder shape there as you study her out through her hip. But for me, if we're going to change her in comparison to our class winner, we need to refine her in the shape to her head, lean her out in her neck and her jawline, and then just drop her right there at her center. Three nice heifers. Let's give a nice round of applause for our champion and reserve champion commercial.
Results from our commercial division, Class 12. Our champion and first place went to Michaela Massey from London, Kentucky. Reserve went to Addison McGlone from Grayson. And third place went to Sierra Miller from South Shore. Now in the ring we have Class 13, which is our Gelbvieh division. This is the only class of Gelbvieh, so this will also be for our division.
So again, to catch everybody up, those of you following along, we've got two class winners out here. Both of these young ladies we just combined two classes, and maybe one other acknowledgement. I believe we have a balancer and a purebred female out here. So some differences, in terms of their breed registry as well. And I think some things to sort through. There is some give and take in these two females. Young lady's black heifer here that's going to go ahead and win. I'll be the first to admit I'd like to lean this one up. She's a little fat for me, a little chubby in terms of her throat and her chest floor and her pones. But you tear in underneath that, and I think there is just a little bit more animal here. I think I think a little bit more shape there to her rib cage, a little more depth of body, a powerful female that sits down on a big set of feet and legs, and I think she's just a little bit more comfortable in the way she goes there off of her rear too. Flexes just a shot better there at her hock and her pastern, and probably hits the surface with a little bit more attractive shape there to her rear too. A leaner heifer here in the red heifer here that's going to be reserved in this particular division, and I really want to call that out because this one is a lot more appropriate in terms of her condition. I like that about her. a female that's pretty naked in terms of her hair coat as well. What you see is what you get, and I like that. I think a strong top female, one that's got some shape to her, female that's got enough body. I'd stouten her up just a touch in terms of her bone work, in terms of her feet. With the shape she has, she comes just a touch rounder in terms of her hip. I'd like to jack her up just a little bit out of her front third, but a nice heifer nonetheless. Let's give a nice round of applause to our Gelbvieh exhibitors.
Results from our Gelbvieh division: first place and champion went to Clarabelle Bishop, and second went to Callie DeRosset. Congratulations to those exhibitors. In the ring currently we have class 14. This is our main division.
Well, just a single entry out here in our main breed, and I think a good display of what this breed can do and the pieces that they bring to the table. Female that's got some look and eye appeal as you study her through her front third, but from there back, one that is really intriguing in terms of her depth of body and the spring to her rib cage. A little bit of a curve bender there in terms of her breed. A female that has all the hallmarks in terms of stoutness and bone that you would expect. A female that I think is blessed with a ton of power from every angle. With her stoutness, a female that's maybe not quite as long and level in terms of her hip shape. And I think because of that, one that doesn't want to get out and travel with quite the authority you might want to see off of her rear too, but one that's really intriguing from a depth and a balance standpoint. Really high quality way to cap out our main heifer show. Let's give that exhibitor a nice round of applause for another good division champion.
Congratulations to our single entry main, which went to Micah Malone from Cynthiana, Kentucky. Congratulations to her. Now entering the ring, we have class 15. This is the first class of our maintainer heifers.
We'll leave them just the way they came in our first class of maintainer heifers here. And I think a very easy place to start in my mind. Beautiful marked heifer here that's going to go ahead and win. One that has so much style and look and eye appeal up front. She's got an uncanny ability there to pick her head and neck up out of the top side of her shoulder, ultra high tying. And from there back, a big-bodied female that's got some shape and some power. We set her in motion, and I think she's one that's really sound in terms of the angle of her shoulder and her knee. She gets out and goes pretty good there off of her rear, too, as well. At times, perhaps just a little bit sharper in the shape to her hock, but I think that's being pretty critical on one that kind of wins this class rather handily in my mind. Blue Roan heifer here that comes next is a nice one. Maybe a little plainer in terms of her presentation, although the young lady's doing an awesome job of getting her shown. Big-bodied female, one that's got some stoutness and some shape. Female that's athletic in the way she goes off her rear too. I'd like a little more of a good thing here. I'd like to just stretch her out. I'd like to jack her up there out of her front third, make her a little bit taller fronted to compete with a really, really nice class winner. But that's a good pair of females. My compliments to each of those exhibitors.
Results from Class 15. First place went to Laura M. Pettit from Flemingsburg, and second went to Emily Caffey from Upton. Now in the ring, we have a single entry, Class 16. At the conclusion of this class, we will show for our champion and reserve maintainer, Heifer.
Another nice single entry. Young man brings us a solid black maintainer female here that's got a lot of power and substance to her, like her rib cage and her body. Female that's got a big foot and bone underneath her. Look forward to getting her out here in our division and some more competition.
Results from Class 16 are single entry. First place went to TJ Weinel. Now we are selecting for our champion and reserve maintainer, Heifer.
Well, not the numbers out here in our maintainers, but certainly a lot of quality. And I'll be the first to admit these three heifers out here are probably as different in terms of their kind as they are in their color. So you got to sort through some of that and lay your preferences where you will. For me, there's one out here that pretty easily ties together the good pieces of a female that I like to see in terms of look and freshness, body, structure, and still having enough to them. Young lady here with our Baldy here out of the first class will be your champion. We're actually going to go ahead and pair those two heifers up and use the blue roan that was second to her. My compliments to each of these exhibitors. Let's give them a nice round of applause.
Congratulations to Laura and Pettit having your champion maintainer heifer. The reserve was out of the same class, Emily Caffey. Congratulations to them. We are now starting our Red Angus division. This is class number 18, a single entry.
A nice red here to start off that part of our show. Young lady brings us a single entry here that could stand some competition. A female that very fresh and juvenile in terms of her appearance. One that's got a neat enough look up front. From there back for a young heifer, one that's got a lot of rib and body and shape to her. Female in terms of her outline out here, I think is more than acceptable. If we're going to change her, I think we just put a little bigger foot underneath her. Let her just get out and go and grab ground with a little more authority and flex. I think she's just a bit tentative in the way she handles those rear two out here. But a quality heifer nonetheless. I think a good way to start off this particular part of our show.
Class 18 results. First place in that single class was Hannah Clark from Slaughters, Kentucky. Now entering the ring, we have class 19.
a challenging class here in our Red Angus, and I think four heifers that are all very, very different in terms of type and kind, and I think a lot of different ways, honestly, you could do this class. For me, the one that kind of jumps out and grabs my attention, the young man's dark red heifer here that's going to go ahead and wins, and I think she does so with just a little bit more substance, frankly. You get up on top of this one, she offers you quite a bit more shape, a female that's blessed with more power as you step in behind him, a big quartered female, bold ribbed female. She has a decided advantage over the rest of the class in terms of her bone work, in terms of the shape to her feet. I'll be the first to admit she's just rocked a touch forward there in terms of her knee. I'd like to maybe relax her in that regard, and at the same time allow her to just pick her head and neck up a little taller out of the top side of her shoulder and clean her up there in terms of her throat. I think that heifer just has the most good things in terms of performance and substance and breeding utility. Young man's heifer here, a little lighter colored heifer here, is one that's sure eye-catching. She is higher headed, a female that's beautiful in terms of her balance from there back, a deep-sided, deep-flanked kind of a heifer. For me, one that's just a little more tentative in terms of her movement, a heifer that searches in her own right there off of her front too, and she does it with less power. There's less muscle, there's less substance of foot and bone in that female. I like her look and eye appeal from the side. I'd just like to stouten her up from end to end, maybe relax her in terms of her angles. Tremendously long-bodied heifer here comes next. The young lady's doing an exceptional job of getting this one shown. Female that I think you have to appreciate in terms of her power. She probably has an advantage over the heifer that goes right in there before. To me, this is one that's putting a little bit more condition there around her pones. You might like to lean her up in that regard. And for all her length, she's one that just struggles a bit more in terms of movement. One we'd like to see get out and take a little more deliberate and a little bit more flexible step out here. Round out the class with one that's moderate framed and short backed, one that's, obviously easy keeping, maybe a hint to her detriment. Female that's got some power, but for me just needs a little bit more look, a little bit more frame. We'd like to stretch this one out up front, clean her up in terms of her chest floor, and allow her to go a bit better off of both ends of her structure.
Results from Class 19. First place went to Caden Kephart from Pleasureville. Second to Craig Holloman from Hanson. Third to Craig Holloman. And fourth to Quentin Ethington from Danville. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 20. Class 21 should be on deck.
Nice effort here to win this particular class. I think one that does so rather handily in my mind. And no, she's not the most beautiful fronted one that we've seen here today. I'd be the first one to tell you we need to change the shape to her skull and her neck just a shot. But from there back, this is a tremendously powerful female. It's got a lot of performance. Awesome in terms of her center body and her rib shape. She sweeps a nice underline underneath of her. She has a distinct advantage over the heifer in second in terms of her bone work, in terms of the size to her feet. Comfortable in the way she goes there off of her rear too. Got plenty of base width, big hip female. I like her from a three-dimensional standpoint. Young man's got a heifer here that's just kind of not wanting to cooperate today, giving him all he wants. A female that's got some length and some freshness about her. Just need to intensify this one in terms of her bone. Give her just a shot more power from end to end. Nice pair of heifers. Nice moderate little cowie package here. Young man's got a heifer that's got some style as you study her there at her throat latch in the center of her neck. Female that's got some depth of body. We need to stouten her up a touch from end to end. We'd like to see a little more of a good thing and just see a bit more power and just a little bit more weight per day of age and performance. Look forward to getting this one out here in some more competition. A nice single entry here. A nice way to round out a Red Angus show. A female that, on the standstill, I think has a ton of quality. A lot of length of neck, smooth-shouldered female that opens up into a big, bold rib cage, sweeping underline, and she does so and has that kind of balance with being tremendously long-spined. I appreciate that about her. Long and level out of her hip and still got a little something to her. If you're going to change her, and I guess the question you need to ask yourself is, does she go good enough? Because she's plenty straight in the angle to her shoulder, plenty tentative in the way she sets those rear two down. I'd like to see her just meet the surface with a little more cushion, but a female that's got a quality look and be a nice addition to our final drive.
Getting caught back up on our results from the Red Angus show. Class 20 results, first place went to Maddie Ethington, second to Caden Kephart. First place in Class 21 was Craig Holloman, and in 21A was Brady Applegate. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now we are exhibiting for our champion and reserve Red Angus Heifer. Up next, we've got Shorthorns.
A nice way to wrap up our Red Angus show out here, and I think certainly some differences in terms of type and kind that need work through. And to be honest with you, I think the decision becomes just how much structure are you comfortable with giving up, and just how much look are you comfortable with giving up. I think that's kind of the balancing act that we got to do out here. There's one for me, I think, that puts together the most good pieces in terms of having the right kind of running gear, still having some substance and some extras in terms of their look. It becomes a bit closer for me for reserve consideration. I'll show you the way I like them, but folks, let's put our hands together and give these Red Angus exhibitors a nice round of applause.
Your champion Red Angus female went to Caden Kephart from Pleasureville, and your reserve went to Maddie Ethington from Danville. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now entering the ring, we will have Class 22. This is the first class of our Shorthorn breed.
Nice trio here to start in our Shorthorn show, and probably a little different little different heifer here in terms of type and kind is going to go ahead and start. I think she wins though, just simply based on structure. This is a heifer that's the most appropriate, particularly in the angle to her shoulder and her knee. A female from their back that's pretty deceiving in terms of just how stout she is. You get up on top of this one, and she is massive backed and tremendously thick-ended. I like her added squareness that she has there from hooks to pins. A female that's very, very athletic in the way she goes there off of her rear too. We could stretch her out just a touch. I'd take her just a bit longer necked, a bit tidier in terms of her chest floor. Might lengthen out her hip just ever so slightly, but that's being really critical on a heifer that's got a really neat combination of structure and power. A little bit longer, leaner heifer here comes next, and I like that about her. She corrects our class winner in that regard. I like how high tying she is, a female that's got some style and eye appeal up front. Tremendously long spine, tremendously strong top, long hip. Female that's got enough foot and bone underneath her. The question marks for me is, does she have just enough genuine body underneath a beautiful fit job, and just how well does she go there off of her front too? At times she wants to get a little bit chancy there in terms of the way she sets her knee down. I think a female that's just a bit straighter there as you study her off of the front end of her structure. Similar things can be said about the heifer in second. I think she has a similar look up front, high-headed, tight-throated, incredibly neat-chested female that balances back into a big, bold rib cage and a sweeping underline. Level hip female there, like the two that go before. To me, she takes the knee angle and just goes a bit farther forward with it. I think this heifer's straighter in that regard, and this one just strikes me as a bit more fragile. You study her in terms of her forerib, you step in behind her, not the true power in terms of lower quarter, not the substance of foot when you get right down at the surface, but one that cuts a neat silhouette out here. Heifer here, the white switched heifer here that comes next, I think cuts a neat silhouette in her own right. Maybe not quite the level of presentation here, but one that's high-headed, tight-throated, tremendously deep-bodied and bold-sprung. I like that. You tie into the center third of this female, and I think that she's really curve-bending in that way. A female that's a little straighter and more opened up in the angle to her shoulder and her knee, and it's when you watch her travel there off of her rear too. A female that's just less attractive in the angles to her back leg, doesn't have the utility and the flexibility that you might like to see in that regard. We round out the class with a heifer that's got some stoutness, got some real body and dimension there in her center third. Easy fleshing kind of a female. It almost works to her detriment because she throws just a little bit more in there right underneath her throat and her chest floor. Like to clean her up in terms of her crest and just lean her up around her tail head. But a nice class of shorthorn heifers. Nice trio, a good discussion there on the top end.
Results from Class 22. First place went to Lane McCall from Eminence. Second to Cheyenne Kaiser from Morning View. Third to Lane McCall. Fourth to Ella Graves. And fifth to Eli Thompson. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 23. This is a single entry in our Shorthorn division.
A single entry Snow White heifer here in our Shorthorn show. Another high quality individual in her own right. One that reads with some power and some substance. She's a female that's really strong top, balances up nice underneath. A big bone and footed heifer that gets out and goes relatively well. You know, in terms of her structure, if you're going to change it at all, and I don't think it's really a structural detriment, but this one is just a bit sharper about her hock, maybe just a little less aesthetically pleasing in the way she meets the surface there off her rear too. Consequently, I think that heifer's just a bit shorter hipped as well, but one from a balance and outline standpoint, I think could stand a ton of competition.
Congratulations to Nate Ruark from Hillsboro with the first place out of Class 23. Now in the ring we have Class 24. This is the last class of our Shorthorn division, so we will be selecting for our champion and reserve Shorthorn heifer at the conclusion of this single entry class.
Young man out here doing an excellent job of showing a heifer that kind of wants to put the moves on him. He's got her nailed right there. I appreciate you getting back on there, young man. That's kind of what this is all about. You got a nice heifer to boot, a female that's got a lot of look up front, tight-throated, tight-chested, a smooth-shouldered female that blends well from there back. If we're going to change her just ever so slightly, you might give her just a little more genuine shape there to her underline and her body wall. But a female that's got loads of style, got loads of quality, she'll be a nice addition out here in our final drive. My compliments to this young man for a job well done.
Congratulations to Lakin Martin from Hillsboro with the first place out of Class 24. Now we are selecting for our champion and reserve Shorthorn Heifer. At the conclusion of this, we will have a single class of Shorthorn Pluses.
Really a high quality shorthorn show out here. Not massive numbers, but I think in spite of that, still one of the deepest breeds we've had. All four heifers out here in the ring right now I would consider really high quality, ones that have got a bright future in front of them in terms of being show heifers and cows for these young people. So I take my hats off to you. There's a pair of them that strike me as kind of being a little bit more ideal in terms of their structure and their balance and their power in their body. We're going to go ahead and pair up the two. They're out of our first class. The young man here with the roan will be our champion. Young lady with a solid red heifer will be reserved. Let's show a nice round of applause for a competitive shorthorn division.
Congratulations to your champion Shorthorn out of that first Shorthorn class, Lane McCall from Eminence. Your reserve went to Cheyenne Kaiser from Morning View. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now entering the ring, we have Class 25, our one and only class of Shorthorn Plus heifers. So this will also serve as our division.
Young lady here with the pink bow is going to go ahead and win this class, and in my mind she does so rather handily. I think a female that is a nice combination of structure and body and power, female that's got some shape and levelness as you study her hip. Female, I'll be the first to admit, we need to lean this one up, and then for my taste we could lay her in a bit smoother there at the point of her shoulder and just elevate her there through her front 1/3. But a female that's got a lot of neat pieces, be a good breeding piece for the young lady. Cool colored heifer here comes next. I think one that is perhaps just a bit leaner and more genuine in terms of her condition. I think because of that, she gives you a little sharper feature there through her front 1/3. Female that's just a touch longer about her neck. Female though that with all that look, we'd like to see just a little bit more balance. We'd like to redesign her in the way she handles her top on the move. And then in particular, as you study her from the hooks back, a female that shuffles a bit more out of her rear too needs to sit down with a little bit more authority in that regard. But a nice pair of heifers nonetheless.
Results from our Shorthorn Plus division. First place and our champion went to Brooklyn Thomas from Brandenburg. Second and the reserve out of that division went to Shelby McKinley out of Anjou, Kentucky. Congratulations to them. Now entering the ring, we have class 27, our first class of our Simmental breed.
Nice pair of heifers here as we start off our Simmental show. Two very highly presented, highly shown kind of cattle. Young man's Black Baldy here that's going to go ahead and wins. I think puts together a lot of good pieces in terms of balance and power and substance. Female to me that's smooth-shouldered, ultra big-bodied and sweeping in her rib cage. And I think that's where she's got just a shot of an advantage is when you tear into the center third of this one. I think that one's just a little bit more expansive in terms of her forerib. Opens up with just a little bit more shape and arch there as you study her center third. Female that's got a big stout hip in her, big bones, big feet. When we set her in motion at times out here, she wants to hesitate just a touch when she goes to the ground there, particularly on her off show side back leg, one that maybe drifts up just ever so slightly in the center of her spine. But I actually think both of these heifers do that. I prefer that one in terms of her balance and just overall shape. Young lady's got a cool colored red baldy here, and one that probably is an improvement on our class winner in terms of her overall length. This one from the top of her shoulders to her tailhead is freight train long, and I do appreciate that about her. Female that's got an attractive shape there to her back legs, a good-footed female. For me, I think one that comes just a little straighter there in the angle to her shoulder, and as we already discussed, a female that's maybe not as genuine in terms of her center body depth, one that rolls up pretty aggressively right in behind her shoulders, breaks just a touch at her loin. Young man's got a quality enough heifer here coming in third. I think one that's a little bit plainer in terms of her presentation, but one that's just massive in terms of her center body. I like the stoutness and the shape coming out of that one's blades. Thick-ended female that obviously isn't giving the young man the easiest trip around the ring today. but he's doing a good job of hanging with her. We could lean her up a touch, pretty her up in terms of her front third, but a good heifer nonetheless. Give and take here in our remaining two options, and I'll be the first to admit the young lady's heifer here isn't as big and long and powerful maybe as the heifer that rounds out the class, but I like this one in terms of her extras. This one's got a little bit more look, a little bit more substance of foot and bone. I feel like she just offers us a few more options as you go to mating on them. Young man's heifer here is long and powerful and got some shape to her rib to round out the class. She just needs to go better off her rear too. We need to stouten up her foot, give her just a shot more show ring eye appeal.
Results from Class 27. First place went to Jordan Stevens from Ewing. Second to Haley Pauley from Maysville. Third to Wyatt Jeffers. Fourth to Caroline Oliver. And fifth went to Blake Sutherland. Congratulations to those exhibitors. In the ring now we have Class 28.
A fair bit of give and take here in our top pair. And young lady solid black heifer, I'll be the first to admit I'm just a little bit more comfortable with her from a structural standpoint. Appreciate this one in terms of her length of spine. I think she has enough rib and enough body depth as you get underneath her. A female that's got enough power as well. And it's when you set her in motion, I'll be I'm not going to go ahead and say that she's perfect, but I think she is quite a bit more comfortable in terms of the angle to her shoulder and her knee. A lot better in the way she travels there out of her hock and at the ground at her rear pastern. Female to me that we would like to give just that elevation and that high tying look as the red baldy that comes next, and that might be the first place we change her. We'd knock that tail head down into her hip a little more neatly, but we'd do that about the red baldy as well. Heifer coming in second. If you like them powerful and eye-catching and big featured, you like this one a lot. One that's massive in terms of her muscularity, great big bone and footer, and as I already said, one that's got a lot of look. This is a high-tying, cool-looking heifer up front. With all of her style and pizzazz, this is one that comes a little bit straighter off of both ends of her skeleton. Female that's more forward in the angle to her knee, more hesitant in the way she goes there in terms of her hock and her rear pastern, and it's her hip that I'd like to change the most. I think this one, for all her shape, is a bit shorter and rounder in her hip shape, and we just got to get that tail head down. Heifer here in third, I think one that's pretty basic in terms of her build. The young lady's white-flanked heifer is one that balances and proportions quite well. She's a smooth-made female that's long-spined and athletic enough in terms of her structure. She needs a little more look. We need to just stretch her out through her front third, tidy her up from crest to throat, and we just like to power that one up just ever so slightly in comparison to the cattle that go before. Young man rounds out the class with maybe the highest weight per day of age, the highest performing, stoutest made heifer in this particular group. One that needs to go better. We need to clean her up in terms of her look through her front 1/3.
Results from Class 28. First place went to Grayson Ruber from Georgetown. Second to Emma Harvey from Lexington. Third to Caroline Maines. And fourth to J.J. Jackson. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 29.
Pretty straightforward place to start off in my mind. Young lady solid black heifer here is just so elegant and so feminine and picturesque when you study her from the side. Tremendously long-sided, tremendously smooth-shouldered, and she ties that forerib back into a big, bold rib cage. Balances up very nicely underneath. A female that I think has got more than enough power. It's when you set her in motion that I think she kind of daylights the class, particularly off of her front end. That heifer is gorgeous in terms of the angle to her shoulder and her knee. I think she's more than acceptable in her travel off of her rear too. You might knock her tail head down on her hip just a shot, maybe tie her just a bit higher out of the top side of her shoulder, but that's critical of a very high quality, very feminine built and angular heifer. Young lady's black heifer here picks her head and neck up taller out of the top side of her shoulder, and I like that about her. She's a female that matches our class winner in terms of her balance underneath. Beautiful rib kind of a heifer that's got some stoutness and shape to her. For me, it's when you set her in motion, you want to redesign her down her top. I think you'd say the same of both of them. I think this heifer just does it with a bit more balance and eye appeal when we have her parked. Red heifer here that rounds out the class is one that's got some symmetry to her. You like her balance underneath, like her center rib, shapely heifer from a muscularity standpoint. One that's just not quite as pliable in the way she handles her spine. And then in particular, we need to redesign this one in terms of the angle to her knee. See her get out and go with a little more flex and comfort there at the ground.
Results from Class 29. In first place was Madison Metzger from Rockfield. Second to Ashlyn Pop from Versailles. And third went to Riley Martin from Taylorsville. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 30. This is our last class of our Simmental breed. At the conclusion of this class we will be showing for our champion and reserve champion Simmental heifer.
Pretty convincing spot to start off in this particular class. A female that's got some feminine character through her front 1/3, a smooth shouldered female that's gorgeous ribbed, strong topped, and got sure enough power for me. If we're going to change her just ever so slightly, I'd lay her back in the angle to her knee. I'd like to see her just get out and go with a little bit more flex and ease, particularly the way she moves out of her hip and the way that translates into how she sets those rear two down. But a very picturesque, very fresh kind of a female for this juncture of her life. Young lady's done a good job of getting her presented and showed. Young man's got a bruiser here next, a powerful heifer that's dense ribbed and thick ended. For me, we just need to tidy her up in terms of her chest floor. I'd like to stouten up her feet and maybe change their shape just ever so slightly and see her go to the ground with a little more comfort and ease. But a nice heifer nonetheless. Good pair here in this particular class.
Results from Class 30. First place went to Madison Metzger from Rockfield, and second to Wyatt Jeffers from Taylorsville. We are now going to have our drive for the Simmental division.
Well, a quality division out here in your purebred semis, as you'd expect. This state's known for good Simmental cattle, and you young people have brought them out here in spades, I think. There's some differences in these cattle, no doubt. I think there's one that puts together the most good pieces for me in terms of having some show ring look and presence, still having some substance and body. I think it gets a little closer for reserve, and I'll go out and give them one more look and show you the order I like them in. But with that said, this is one of the really high-quality drives we've had in this show. For those of you standing ringside, let's give them a nice round of applause.
Congratulations to your champion Simmental, exhibited by Jordan Stevens from Ewing. And your reserve went to Madison Metzger from Rockfield. Congratulations to them. Now we are rolling into our percent Simmental division, starting with class number 31.
a diverse pair out here as we start our low semi show, and certainly give and take between these two females, and perhaps a bit more than just their hair coat and presentation would initially indicate. Young man's going to win the class with a tall fronted heifer here that's got a big set of running gear underneath her, and I think that's maybe kind of the deciding factor for me. I like her added foot. I like the shape she has to her bone. Feel it's got enough shape in terms of muscularity for me. A female, if we were going to change her, we'd just stouten her up a little bit in terms of her center body. I'd like to drop her there in her middle, and in relation, clean her up in terms of her chest floor, make her a little taller and prettier out of her front end. Heifer in second's actually stouter, you guys. You get right up on top of her. The Brockle's got a little bit more shape. She's bigger hipped and thicker ended, probably a little lower there in her center. She's frailer in terms of her construction, though, a little bit plainer in terms of her general kind. Don't know that there's quite the extras there to go ahead and breed on, but I think a close pair, a nice pair of heifers here to start off our low semi show.
Results from Class 31. First place went to Parker Keys and second to Reed Graves. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 32 of our percent Simmental heifers.
A nice class out here as we progress through the low semis. A nice pair here on the top end. And that said, I think the star-headed female here kind of has to win just from an overall quality standpoint. Incredibly balanced heifer, one that proportions out really, really well. Angular female in terms of her shoulder. I like the way it ties back into her body cavity. Deep-sided female that's got really the appropriate muscle package in my mind. Very feminine and long in terms of her muscle attachment. Clean-jointed female, a female that's got enough foot and bone for me. If we're going to change her just slightly, you might stretch her out from end to end. As balanced as she is, I think we could just stretch her out in terms of her length of neck and her length of spine ever so slightly. And while she goes to the ground with a lot of comfort and flex, I wish she just got out there and reached just a shot better at times out here. But a female that easily, I think, from a balance and a quality standpoint, goes ahead and wins. Young lady's kind of got a sneaky good one here in second. One that, maybe not quite as out there in terms of her presentation, but the young lady does an awesome job of getting her shown. Female that's high-headed, fresh in terms of her condition, very genuine in terms of the shape there to her body. I think she's got more than enough depth, more than enough power. Female that's comfortable as we set her in motion out here at the surface. Maybe not quite just the overwhelming symmetry that we see in that class winner, but a very logical, nice place to go in second here. Beautiful marked heifer, the baldy with the white flank. I think one that follows the one right in front of her very closely in terms of type and kind. It's a female that's still got some look about her, smooth-shouldered, really good in terms of her forerib. Female that proportions out really nice from the side. If we were to change her, we'd just stouten her up a touch. Maybe not quite as big hip, maybe not quite as expressive in terms of her muscle pattern. Female that doesn't set down on quite the substance of foot, but a good one nonetheless. I just like the kind of the heifer here that goes next, just a shot better the remaining options. And I'll be the first to admit, hey, she's a little tighter haired, and what you see is what you get. And that's fine, because I think it's a heifer that's still got a feminine head, like the ones that go before her. Smooth shouldered, long spined, feminine in terms of her build, very ideal in terms of her condition. She needs to settle down on her rear pasterns with more comfort and cushion. We'd power that one up from end to end just a shot, but one that I like just in terms of her feminine package. The baldy here in second is kind of the opposite side of the coin, because this one is incredibly pulled apart, incredibly wide base, big back, thick-ended, bigger boned and footed than the one that goes before. With all that power comes just a little bit more of a masculine shape to her front 1/3. This one's head is just a little bit more mature. Female that's deeper from the top of her crest into her throat. We'd lean her up just a touch and lengthen out her hip if we could, but one that's powerful and's got a lot of neat pieces for the young lady to mate on. A heifer here that comes next, I think, is one that's got some substance and power as you read her out of the backside of her blade. Thicker ended kind of a heifer here, but one with that power, gets up in the center of her back, not as comfortable in the way she meets the surface. We need to redesign the shape to her rear toes and set her down on a more correct foot. Young man that rounds out the class here has got one that's just basic in terms of her build. She's easy keeping. She's got some body. A heifer for me that just needs stoutened up. She just needs a little more of an elite look in terms of her front 1/3. Clean that navel up underneath just a touch, but a nice way to round out a quality class. Nice place to start off in this class. Young lady here in the pink shirt's got a quality baldy heifer that I think is probably just the safest in this class in terms of her structure. Female that's got enough foot and bone underneath her, enough body and shape as you tie into the middle of her body, and one that I think is just a little bit more ideal in the way she's designed from hooks to pins. We'd certainly tone her down in terms of her head shape. We'd like to tuck that chest floor and brisket back into her body a little more neatly, but I think a pretty logical place to start off in my mind. Young man's baldy here in second, I think follows most closely in terms of just her general quality. This one is a little taller fronted, a little higher headed. Female that's got some shape and balance underneath. She needs to just be refined in terms of her tailhead. We need to see her go to the surface with just more cushion off of her rear too. I think that'll allow her to get out and move with a little more authority. Young man rounds out the class with a nice baldy heifer that's probably the most appropriate in terms of her condition of any. One that's ultra smooth. We just need to power her up from end to end.
Catching up on results here for the Percent Simmental show. The results from Class 32, first place went to Josie Phillips, second to Anna McCord, third to Braden Emmons, fourth to Grayson Ruber, fifth to Madeline Strain, sixth to Avery Oliver, and seventh to Braylon Works. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Results from Class 33, first place went to Sadie Jackson, second to JJ Jackson, and third to Owen Oliver. Congratulations to them as well. Now in the ring we have Class 34. This is our last class of Percent Simmentals. So at the conclusion of this class, we will show for our division in the Percent Simmentals.
Another standout here on the top side of our fall class. Young lady brings us a solid black heifer that does a lot of things really right. One that's just beautiful in terms of her skeleton and her structure. Like this one an awful lot in terms of the angle to her shoulder and her knee. A female that's enormous in terms of her body and her rib shape. And you step in behind the cattle, you probably don't expect her to have quite the power that she does. This one's pretty big backed, pretty thick-ended and square in terms of her hip. It allows her to get down and go really, really well there off of her rear, too. You know, I think if we're going to change this heifer, she's probably getting like me at this point of the day. She probably needs a cup of coffee more than anything. She's just a little bit lazy out here. Might lean her up just a touch. I think that might give her just a little sharper feature up through her front 1/3. But that one looks like kind of a little mini cow that gets around the ring extra, extra comfortably. Young lady rounds out the class with a big, stout, powerful heifer in her own right. One that works a lot of shape down her back. Probably got a pretty athletic rear too as you study him. Maybe not clipped exactly that way, but a female that gets out and flexes well at her hock and her pastern. We just need her to balance up better from end to end.
Results from Class 34. First place went to Josie Phillips from Maysville. Second to Riley Martin from Taylorsville. Congratulations to them. Now we are going to select for our champion and reserve champion per Simmental.
Another good division out here, as you would certainly expect. And I think these cattle on display put together the pieces that I think this particular breed is known for in terms of balance and symmetry, body and power. I think there's two of them out here that take it to another level in terms of just show ring eye appeal and quality. And then from there, I think you got to sort through some subtle differences in terms of structure and frame score and freshness. I think it's pretty darn close between our champion and reserve. I'm going to give them one more look out here. I'll show you how I like them. Let's put our hands together and congratulate these exhibitors.
Congratulations to your champion percent Simmental that went to Josie Phillips. Your reserve also went to Josie Phillips from Maysville. Congratulations to Josie. Now entering the ring, we will be showing class 36. 35 was a scratch, so we're starting off with class 36 of our Hereford heifers.
Good way to start off our Hereford show here. Harper brings us a heifer named Nova, and I think Nova's pretty darn nice. A heifer that gets this show kicked off in a big way. One that's balanced, attractive, feminine, and fresh, smooth-shouldered and big-bodied, and still got some shape to her. Young lady, we sure are glad you're out here today, and my congratulations to you. Look forward to getting this heifer out in some more competition.
Congratulations to our single entry, class 36, Harper Ray from Brooksville. Now in the ring, we have class 37.
kind of a challenging group to put together out here in this particular class. Just certainly a lot of different types and kinds and shapes and sizes. The longer they're out here, the lighter tinted heifer here that's going to go ahead and wins. I think she puts the most good together in terms of her silhouette and in terms of her show ring look and eye appeal. A female that's smooth shouldered, tremendously nice in terms of her top line, and as you study her from hooks to pins, she's got an athletic back leg, very highly presented back leg, one that's got a really nice shape there to her underline. You know, if we're going to change her, and I think we'd say this about several in this class, we'd like to make her a little more relaxed in the angle to her shoulder and her knee. But I think as you compare her to the darker pigmented heifer right behind her, she does so with just a little more stoutness of foot and bone. Young lady's got kind of a nice heifer here in her own right, one that's a little bit longer sided, still balances up and has the correct body shape and rib shape to her, like our class winner, one that goes pretty good there off of her rear too. We just need to stouten her up in terms of her bone work and her foot shape, need to relax her in terms of the angle to her knee and her shoulder, and at the same time just make her tie a shot higher there out of her front end, give her just a little bit more look. You know, one that's very similar to our class winner in terms of body length comes next, a heifer that's got enough rib shape underneath her, got a little bit more foot shape and bone if you compare to that heifer that goes right before. Like the two that go before, we need to change this one in the angle to her knee. We need to redesign this one from hooks to pins. She gets a little lower and narrower in terms of her pin set, kind of flags that tail head up there to compensate it. If we could change her in that regard, I think it'd be to her benefit. Round out the class with a heifer that's a little bit of a problem child for me because I like her scale, her length, her just how tall she is there out of her front 1/3, just how fresh she is in terms of her condition. So when you get to studying her in terms of her joint work and in terms of her angles to her structure that you want to change her, a bigger hock, kind of a female that's rocked a little more forward there in terms of her knee, and we just need more body and more real world shape to this one's underline and midrib if we could change her in that regard. And if it comes with more condition and time, I think the young lady's got some intriguing pieces in that one.
Results from Class 37. First place went to Benton Wise from Campbellsville. Second to Parker Thomas from Richmond. Third to Emily Tabor. And fourth to Hallie Hughes. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 38 of our Herefords.
Well, you never know quite what you're going to get, and this big class comes charging in the ring, and just one after another, cattle that are pretty darn good come up in here, and so you knew it was going to take a little bit of extra time, and I apologize for using a little bit more of everyone's time this evening. And young man that's going to win this class does so, I think, in convincing fashion. I like this heifer an awful lot in terms of just her overall package. Incredibly feminine built female that's beautiful in terms of the angle to her shoulder. I like how smooth she blends from her point back into her forerib. This one's balance is really kind of unmatched in this class in terms of her symmetry underneath. Female, it's beautiful in her top line, got the right kind of muscle pattern as you step in behind her, long muscled, still got some stoutness and three-dimensional quality to her. And you set her in motion, she gets out and travels with relative ease here when you compare to the next two heifers. One that gets out and flexes appropriately at her knee, one that grabs the most ground as you watch her travel off of her rear to high quality heifer to go ahead and start. The next two heifers I think are actually very similar. Big, stout kind of heifers. A heifer here that is going to go ahead and be second. Young man's got is powerful down her top, thick-ended, beautiful in terms of her balance underneath. Female to me of these two options, I think this one's just a shot taller fronted, gives us just a little bit more look up front, and it's when you really dig in and study the angles to their structure. This one offers us just a little bit more give and cushion there at her hock and her rear pastern. For me, I wish she went out and reached with a little more authority, but that's a neat Hereford female that's got a lot of breeding value going forward. If you just want to talk about sheer power and hip and muscle as you step in behind the cattle, you like the young man's heifer here that comes next. This one is so big pinned, so thick-ended, and still has that balance and rib shape and body that we see in the two that go before him. You get to splitting hairs out here. If we're going to change this one and we watch her stop, she's just a shot straighter there in the angle to her hock. Maybe not quite the cushion in terms of the angle to her pastern. And at times when she's not gathered just perfectly, this one wants to run downhill just a touch. We'd just like to redesign her and lift her up in her front end. But a big, another one is big and stout and powerful, got a lot of breeding value. Young lady's heifer here next, one that I like an awful lot. She probably doesn't have the bells and whistles as the three that go before in terms of balance and presentation and look, but this is a sound-structured female that's ultra-feminine, ultra-maternal in her kind. For me, you'd like to lengthen out her hip and fixtures just a shot from hooks to pins. And as you compare to the cattle that go before, you'd like to tidy her up just a bit there in her jawline. But that's critical of a heifer that gets out and grabs ground with so much ease and with so much flexibility as you study her off of both ends of her skeleton. Young man's heifer next, another different one here in this particular class, perhaps the longest necked, longest sided one of this group, one that's very honest and genuine in her condition. With that, she's not as busted apart in terms of her forerib. She comes in a few more pieces. We'd like to stouten that one up in terms of her hip just ever so slightly. But that one's got some runway in front of her. I like that length. I like that eye appeal and that show ring look she brings to the table. Young man's got his heifer nailed here next, doing a really good job with a big body, basic kind of a female. It's got a lot of cow power and value going forward. For me, we just need to lengthen her out through her front 1/3, give her just a bit more look, set her down on a little more foot and bone. One that does some of those things differently, young man's a little bit lighter pigmented heifer here coming next. This one is ultra long bodied, ultra fresh in terms of her condition. She does have some added pipe underneath her when you study her in terms of her foot and bone. There's just not as much calf here from a three-dimensional standpoint, not as much real body shape and rib, just not enough power when you compare her back to a competitive class. And we round out the class with the young lady's heifer that's very basic in terms of her build. She checks a lot of those brood cow boxes in terms of being balanced and big-bodied. We just need to see her have a bit more look. We just like a little more stoutness from end to end.
Results from Class 38. First place went to Levi Womack from Pembroke. Second to Andrew Ray from Brooksville. Third to Quentin Ray. Fourth to Ellen Todd. Fifth to J.W. Cox. Sixth to Will Beckley. Seventh to Bo Todd. And eighth to Annie Eaton. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 39 of our Hereford heifers.
Another nice big class here. And that said, I think the young man's heifer that wins the class does so rather handily in my mind. I think this one puts together a lot of really, really neat pieces in terms of show heifer quality. Gives you a good enough look up front, a female that's really strong in terms of her top line. Got the right shape as you step in behind him. Is athletic as any in this class in terms of her feet and legs, and still does so with some added substance of foot and bone. You know, if you're going to change her, she's maybe not the deepest flanked one that we've seen all day today, but a heifer that's very, very high quality nonetheless, and I think will be a nice addition out here in our final drive. Young man's heifer that comes next, not wanting to cooperate the best, and one that's kind of worked up for me the longer they're out here. I'll be the first to admit she's a little plainer in her shape in terms of her shoulder and her hip. We'd redesign her from hooks to pins, but this is an ultra loose made female that's big bodied. For me, I think is the safest in terms of her brood cow potential, one that's ultra long spined as well. Young man here in third is doing an awesome job of getting this one shown. I think one that cuts us a nice silhouette from the side. Perhaps a few more bells and whistles and look as you study her through her front third. This is a smooth-shouldered female that's big-bodied as well. For me, we'd like to redesign her as we study her down her top line. She's a little more washed out over her loin, a female that drops just a touch in terms of her pin set and flags a bit there in terms of her tailhead. Is as you step in behind the cattle, you realize she just doesn't have quite as much shape as the two that go before. Heifer here in third is maybe one of the longest bodied females that we've seen in this show today, and I appreciate that about her. Still offers us some shape. For me, she's a little plainer in terms of her depth of body, a little more fragile in terms of her bone and footwork. Heifer here next is one that's high tying, really tight throated, got a neat look up front. For me, it's if she has enough right in behind her blades, if there's enough forerib power there, and if she has got enough cushion as you study her off of her front end. One that's a little straighter in the angle to her shoulder, less comfortable in the way she goes to her knee, consequently at times wants to twist her toes out ever so slightly. Round out the class with a nice heifer in her own right. Young lady does a great job of getting her shown. I think a female that's loose in terms of her structure and her skeleton. This one's a little shorter in terms of her face, just a little bit more confusing in the way she's designed through her front 1/3. I'd like to tidy her up in her throat and her chest floor, balance her up a shot better underneath. Maybe not the biggest in terms of her heart or her flank, but again, a heifer that's very loose made. I think this speaks to just how difficult the class was.
Results from Class 39. First place went to J.W. Cox from Flemingsburg. Second to Case Thomas from Richmond. Third to Zach Imbriglio. Fourth to Ashlyn Tingle. Fifth to Marley Granis, and sixth to Marley Granis. Congratulations to those exhibitors. Now in the ring we have Class 40.
Nice duo out here. Certainly some give and take. I think some things we'd change about both of them. Young lady's heifer here that's going to win gives us just a little bit neater look from the side. I think this one's a bit longer fronted, a bit higher in the way she ties her neck out of the top side of her shoulder. Appreciate this one in terms of her length of spine and her length of hip. You know, she's not perfect in the way she handles her rear too. Maybe not the most attractive in the angle or set to her pastern, but it's functional enough. When we set her in motion, I think she's got some give there at her hock. She sits down on a big stout foot. we might lay her back in the angle to her knee, change her in the shape to her throat and her face just ever so slightly. But I think that one's got some extras, got some neat pieces for the young lady to breed on. Heifer here in seconds, a little shorter coupled, just a little bit more moderate package, and that's okay. I think she's very smooth-shouldered, easy keeping kind of a female. For me, we just like to pick her up through her front third, give her a bit more look, and maybe just stouten her and intensify her in terms of her foot shape, in terms of her bone work, drop her in her flank and balance her out just a touch better. Nice pair of heifers nonetheless.
Results from Class 40. First place went to Harley Watson from Flemingsburg, and second to Brenna Perkins from LaGrange. Now in the ring we have Class 41. This is our last Hereford class of the day, so at the conclusion of this we will select for our champion and reserve Hereford heifer.
Tough class here. I think quality quality pieces in all these heifers, and if you want to jumble them up a little bit here or there, I won't argue with you. Young man that's going to win the class, it does so from a structural standpoint. I'm the most comfortable with this one in terms of her feet and legs. You study this one in the way, in particular, she handles her rear too. She just got way more range of motion, way better in terms of her shape to her joints and the angle to her feet and legs back there. A female that's got a lot of added bone, huge feet, and one that gets out and travels with enough athleticism off of both ends to propel her to the top spot in this particular class. We'd change her in terms of her throat and her chest floor. We'd like to stouten her up from behind in terms of her power, but again, I think one that's just the safest in terms of her structure long term. This is Mara here in second. She's done an excellent job with her heifer, highly presented female, one that's got a little bit more look and eye appeal to her, one that's got the right kind of balance underneath. It's structurally where we'd like to change her, a heifer that we need to redesign in the shape there to her front feet. She's wanting to get a little east and west on us, a little more forward in her knee, and then just off the opposite end of her structure, just the same, one that's not as comfortable in the way she goes, and her hock and her rear pastern, a little smaller footed and shorter toed. We'd like to tamp that tailhead down into her hip a bit better. Young lady here coming next has a very basic heifer in terms of her kind, one that I think is sounder than the heifer that goes before or the one that rounds out the class, one that's smooth made. We just need a little bit more of her, a little more body, a little more stoutness and look and eye appeal, but a heifer, again, that has some safety built into her structure. Round out the class with a big-bodied, easy-flushing kind of a female that needs leaned up and cleaned up in terms of her throat latch and her chest floor. Like to see this one go with just a little bit more agility. Like to change the shape to her toes just ever so slightly. This one's getting a little longer and flatter in terms of her feet, shallower in her heel. If we could change her there, that'd be to her benefit as well. Well, Brent warned me here as we got into the Herefords that the numbers would be big. I'm not so sure this isn't the biggest breed we've seen out here today, and certainly some high points and some quality spots within it. Very pleased with the drive of cattle that we get out here. I think our champion and reserve will be great additions to our final drive. That said, I'm going to put the mic down and show you the order I like them in. I think our champion's pretty easy in my mind. I think it gets a bit closer for reserve. But with that, folks, let's congratulate these Hereford exhibitors on an exceptional show. Put our hands together.
Congratulations to your champion, Hereford heifer, Levi Womack from Pembroke, and your reserve Hereford heifer went to J.W. Cox from Flemingsburg. Congratulations to both of them. Now we're switching gears and moving into our Limousin and Lim-Flex show with Class 42.
A nice way to start off here in our Lemmy show. Young lady brings us a very complete heifer, one that's very maternal in terms of her look and her kind. A female that's smooth-shouldered, great big-bodied, very athletic, as we set her in motion out here. We change her just a touch there in the way she's designed it. Her tailhead, someone's done an excellent job of fitting it and getting it blended into her back, but I do think her tailhead bone sticks up there just a bit, and that's just a touch distracting from what otherwise is a very balanced heifer. Heifer here in second is probably just a little punchier, just a little bit farther along in terms of weight per day of age and performance. Love the body in this one as well. The power that she offers is really, really impressive. To me, we just need to design this one a bit different through her front 1/3, make her a little more ladylike there at her throat and her chest floor. And like we said, the one that goes before, we need to drag her tailhead down into her hip a little nicer, stouten her up in terms of her pins. Nice pair of heifers, though. Good way to start off our Lemmy show.
Results from Class 42. First place went to Amanda Purvis from Versailles, and second went to Julia Weber from Harrodsburg. Congratulations to both of them. Now in the ring, we have Class 43.
Kind of an interesting pair here on the top side of this class, and if I'm honest, I wish we could combine these two heifers. I think that one would be absolutely ideal. That said, the young lady that's going to go ahead and win, I like this heifer a lot from a femininity and a freshness standpoint. This one's got an advantage in terms of the way she picks her head and neck up out of the top side of her shoulder. Longer spine female from their back, one that's very nice in terms of the angles to her hock and her rear pastern. Big bone, big footed heifer that gets around the ring quite comfortably. You know, if we're going to change her, I think this heifer, the question you got to ask is there enough real body there? Is there enough real forerib? And I'd like to bust her apart just a shot in terms of the shape to her forerib. Give her just a little bit more real drop and sag there to her middle. I think she's fresh and she's, you know, obviously young in terms of her show career. That's, you know, with calf has got some time to change, but that's where we change our class winner, especially in comparison to our second. I think this one is a little bit shorter statured, a little bit shorter bodied. With that comes a little bit more depth and sag and swing there to her underline. I like this one's forerib power. I like her center rib and dimension that she has just a shot better than our class winner. Like our class winner, I think she drives off of an athletic back leg and probably honestly has just a bit of an advantage in terms of her power and muscle shape. For me, it's is there just enough length and enough look on this one. This heifer comes a little shorter there through her front 1/3, a little more advanced in terms of her condition. Like to clean her up in terms of her chest floor, just give her a little bit neater look from the side. Heifer here next is fresher in terms of her condition, still got some body to go with it, a little plainer in the way she's designed up front, a little bit higher in terms of her tail head. Heifer that rounds out the class is a little bit different in terms of her type and kind, a little more moderate, boxier type of female that's bold ribbed. Just need to stretch this one's front third out and clean up those wrinkles under her chin and in her chest floor. A very nice single entry. The young lady brings us a heifer that could stand in competition in her own right. Smooth-shouldered female that's got plenty of body. Very, very nice when you study her from hooks to pins. Long and level in terms of her hip structure. I think one that gets out and goes relatively well off of both ends of her structure. Not the wildest fronted one we've seen all day. You tuck her up in terms of her chest floor and just balance her out a shot better underneath. Might like to lay that tail head into her back just a little nicer, but a good quality female in her own right. Young lady's done a nice job.
Results from Class 43. First place went to Michaela Massey from London. Second to Julia Weber from Harrodsburg. Third to Ashlyn Pop. And fourth to Tillman Durosset. Congratulations to them. Class 44 was a single entry. First place went to Amanda Purvis. This is Class 45, and it is our last class of our Limmies. At the conclusion of this class, we will be selecting for our champion and reserve.
A pretty easy place to start in this class in my mind. A heifer that proportions so well out here. A young lady, solid black one that's beautiful in terms of her structure. This one is just so effortless in the way she gets around the ring. Very angular in terms of her shoulder. A female that's big-bodied. Awesome in terms of the way she handles her rear too. Probably not the stoutest one we've seen all day in terms of lower quarter and twist. We'd clean her up in terms of her throat just ever so slightly, but one that is just gorgeous in terms of her structure, her body, her maternal character. Pretty convincing place to start in this class in my mind. One in second here is a little bit stouter featured, a little bigger backed, a little thicker ended. Female that's still got some look, especially when you get above her chest. You look at the center of her throat and the way her neck ties out of the top of her shoulder. I think she actually probably corrects our class winner just slightly in that regard. I'd like to see her travel with just a little bit more attractive set to her rear too. She's a little bit more odd in the shape to her foot, a little higher in terms of her tail head, a little bit more pronounced in terms of the way her pones are arranged on her hip. Round out the class with a big high-performing heifer that's got length and power. Just need to pull the pieces together a bit better, balance her up a little better underneath with a little bit more body depth.
Results from Class 45. First place went to Samantha Pico, second to Jackson Kidd, and third to Ashlyn Pop. Now we are selecting for our champion and reserve, Lemmy female.
A great division out here. I think 4 heifers in contention that are very, very good and continue to add to the story of what I like in females. Sound structured, big bodied, smooth made kind of cattle out here that still got something to them. I think our champion and reserve are actually quite close in terms of their type and kind. Subtle differences will sort them. I'm going to go out here and give them one more look, set the mic down, and show you the order that I like them in. But with that, folks, let's congratulate these Lemmy exhibitors on a very, very competitive show.
Congratulations to Samantha Pico from Ewing with your champion Limousin female, and your reserve went to Amanda Purvis from Versailles. Congratulations to them. Now coming in the ring, we have one AOB. It is an Aberdeen. This is also the division for our AOBs.
A young man brings us a very, very high quality Aberdeen heifer here in our AOBs. Female that's big bodied, got some power to her, still got a nice look up front. I like her in terms of her head shape, her neck attachment, her throat. Female that'll be a nice addition out here to our final drive. Let's congratulate this division champion with a nice round of applause. A nice way to round out our show here, and we're going to leave them the way they came in. Young man's lighter white heifer here is going to go ahead and win, and I think she does so from a freshness and a structural integrity standpoint. Female's got just a little bit more length up front, a female that's a little smoother about the point of her shoulder and the way she transitions into her forerib, and then past that, just way more comfortable in terms of this one's feet and legs, the shape she has to her feet, her joint quality. When we set her in motion, I think one that's pretty comfortable out here in the ring. Kind of a copper-colored heifer here comes around next, and if you want to say that she's stouter and bigger muscled, bigger boned, I'll certainly grant you that, because she is. There's a lot more shape there in this female. With it comes a bit more shoulder. She's a little more opened up front, and it's when you study this one at the ground you want to change her, particularly off of her back too. She wants to roll pretty aggressively there on the outside of her footwall. A little coarser jointed kind of a female. With it, not as comfortable in the way she travels. Nice pair of heifers, though. These two young men are doing a great job.
Results from Class 46. First place went to Austin Pito. Class 47, first place went to Micah Nunn, and second to Grayson Howard. Those were also your champion and reserve of the Charolais breed. Now entering the ring, we have all of our breed champions. From the Angus breed, Josie Phillips. From our black Herefords, we have Emily Tabor. From the Keys, Claire Beth Peterson. Our Chi-Angus was Kat Branscombe. Our Maine was from Micah Malone. The commercial champion went to Michaela Massey. Your maintainer was from Laura Ann Pettit. The Simmental was with Jordan Stevens. The percent Simmental was also Josie Phillips. From your Lemmy division, we have Samantha Pico. From the Red Angus, Caden Kephart. From the Shorthorns, Lane McCall. Your Shorthorn Plus was from Brooklyn Thomas. Your Hereford went to Levi Womack. Your Charolais champion was Micah Nunn. Let's give a big round of applause to all of these exhibitors that are in the ring tonight for their winnings. While our judges sorting this champion drive, I just want to introduce him one last time with everybody in here. Our judge today was John Sweeney. He, his wife Kayla, and son Jack reside in Cedarville, Ohio. Here they operate Sweeney cattle, which focus on raising Angus show cattle. These cattle are marketed in conjunction with Kayla's family operation, Campbell Co., where John, Kayla, and Jack also help. Originally, he is from Mitchellville, Iowa. John is a 2011 graduate of Iowa State University with a degree in ag business. After graduating, he started a career with Ellen Co. Animal Health and as a beef sales representative for Indiana and Ohio, where he currently works. John has judged many national, state, and local shows across 10 different states. So if you would join me in giving our judge for tonight a round of applause.
Folks, it's that time where we're in the final drive. We need to give some thanks to some people that really make this whole show possible. First and foremost, we want to thank this facility, the Kentucky Fair and Expo Center. Folks, we're fortunate here in Kentucky to have the greatest livestock center in the country to show cattle in. So give this center and the people that work here a big round of applause, please. With that, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of people. Kentucky Block and Bridle helps us every year. The Kentucky Department of Agriculture, absolutely priceless. Folks, I know we can do some things better, and we try hard. We try real hard. We know classes were posted late. We also know that some of you entered your cattle at 4 o'clock, okay? That in this Kentucky show, the reason it's tonight is we want to favor Kentucky kids. We want to help them any way we possibly can and give them that extra look tonight versus having to compete tomorrow also with all the open show cattle. The other is all your sponsors. You can look around the ring. It takes a lot of money to own this facility and to run it. And when you start looking at the finances of the Kentucky Beef Expo, folks, it's staggering at what the prices have done over the last few years. And please support these sponsors, particularly Kentucky Farm Bureau, who puts about $25,000 into the Kentucky Beef Expo. So give those sponsors a huge round of applause because they make it happen for us. With that, when I go to select judges for this, there's some criteria that has to come to play. One criteria for me is you've had to done it. I love college-educated people. I love judging team coaches. I was on one. That's great. I want a guy in the ring that's not only done that and put his time in, but I want a guy that's actually had to show these, had to fit them, had to feed them, and bring them to the ring and know exactly what it takes to get here. Because at the end of the day, we know what it takes to get cattle in this ring. And, folks, you've got a guy in the ring today, without a doubt. His pedigree is unmatched in terms of where he's worked, what he's done, and the credentials he has to stand in front of the ring and sort these heifers. With that, please give your judge, John Sweeney, a big round of applause. He deserves it. He'll be judging steers tomorrow. We're glad to have him tonight with Jet. John, I'm going to turn it over to you. Get you a top 5.
Well, Brent, thank you for the kind words, and I'd like to echo some of his sentiments. I think it's a neat deal that you guys do this Kentucky show here. I think that the Open Show is one of the marquee events in the Midwest all spring in terms of a jackpot show, and to kind of put on display the night before that, what you guys are doing here at a state level, I think is very impressive. You could put this drive of heifers in a lot of different scenarios, whether it be jackpots or junior nationals or state fairs, and there's a lot of these heifers that are going to rise to the top. I've been really blown away with the quality out here, and I think that just speaks to just how good of a job you guys do here in the state. Brent said it, this is kind of sacred ground here in the show cattle business, this particular venue, and so it is anytime you get to come here and sort cattle, it's a treat, and I've enjoyed myself very, very much I look forward to the steer show tomorrow. But those of you that know me know I'm a heifer guy by heart, and so to get out here and work through some of these breeds, there's probably no better way I would spend a Saturday night than to do that. We don't get to do it without these kids. Guys, there's really not a lot of point to this show cattle business without these juniors, and I want to point that out. The hard work that they put in, the effort, the passion that they have, it's critical to the success of this business, and it makes me feel good about the future ag. And Kentucky's a leader in that standpoint. They're a leader in the cattle business, and your young people are on display out here this evening. With that, I know we got a big show tomorrow. I know everybody wants to get these things broke down and get them out to tie-outs, but last thing there is to do, let's put our hands together and congratulate these young people. I'll put 5 heifers together for you.
Congratulations to your champion heifer for the Kentucky Beef Expo Junior Show, Josie Phillips with the Angus. The one that came in for reserve also belongs to Josie. Congratulations to your reserve champion heifer, also an Angus belonging to Josie Phillips. Congratulations. Your third overall goes to Levi Womack with the Hereford. Your fourth overall goes to the Percent Semi belonging to Josie Phillips. Your fifth overall goes to the maintainer, Laura Ann Pettit. Congratulations to all of our exhibitors tonight, and thank you all for coming out to watch the Kentucky show.